Hello and welcome. Every business, big or small, operates in a territory that's just filled with uncertainty. But what if you had a map for that territory? A real way to see the dangers up ahead and navigate right through them. Well, today, that's exactly what we're doing. We're diving into the powerful world of risk analytics, which is basically the science of charting a course through the unknown.
So, that leads to the big question, right? How do businesses actually see into the future? Now, that sounds like something out of science fiction, but it's the fundamental challenge every single organization faces. How do you prepare for what you can't see coming? The answer, it turns out, isn't a crystal ball. It's a disciplined, data-driven approach. In a word, it's analytics.
And this right here is the heart of it. Risk analytics is all about using data to turn those vague, unknown fears into risks that you can actually assess, put a number on, and manage. It's about transforming that dangerous, uncertain territory into a detailed map which lets you chart the safest and, the most effective course forward.
So here's our roadmap for this journey. First, we'll nail down exactly what we're talking about. Then we'll explore the three major territories of risk: financial, operational, and strategic. And finally, we'll pop open the toolbox that managers use to turn all these insights into real, concrete action.
Okay, let's stick with this map idea, because it works really well. Without risk analytics, a business is basically sailing in the dark with no lights on. But with it, you can suddenly see the reefs, you can see the storms brewing, you can see the currents. You can finally understand the landscape you're actually operating in.
Now, this is crucial. Not all risks are created equal. We can group them into three major categories, and you could think of these as different layers on our map. First, there's the financial layer, which is all about tracking the flow of money. Then you've got the operational layer, which details the internal machinery of the business. And finally, the strategic layer, showing you the wider world outside your four walls.
Let's start by following the money. Financial risks, well, they're tied directly to a company's capital, its assets, and its position in the market. In this world, even a tiny change in the numbers can create absolutely massive waves.
And the variety of financial risks is just vast. You've got credit risk, which is just the chance a borrower won't pay you back. There's market risk, where the value of your investments could suddenly tank. It also includes things like counterparty risk. Will the other side of a deal actually hold up their end of the bargain? And you even have sovereign risk, which is the wild possibility that an entire government could default on its own debt.
Now, to measure these threats, analysts use some seriously powerful tools. A real cornerstone is the value at risk, or VAR, calculation. It's a perfect example of how analytics puts a concrete number on all this uncertainty. It basically answers the question, hey, based on the past, what's the absolute maximum loss we should expect on this investment next month with 95% confidence? And that other 5%? Well, that's where you find the potential for those extreme black swan events nobody saw coming.
But the scope is even broader than that. Analytics helps companies model that delicate balance between risk and reward for any investment, making sure they aren't taking on huge dangers for just a tiny potential gain. And it is the absolute bedrock of the entire insurance industry, which, when you think about it, is fundamentally in the business of calculating the probability of stuff happening and putting a price on that risk.
All right, next up, we turn from the markets to the machine itself. Operational risks are the dangers that come from within, from the day-to-day running of the business. This is all about where people, processes, and systems can fail.
And the threats here are, well, they're everywhere. Cybersecurity is a massive one we all hear about constantly, but there's also the risk of not complying with regulations or failing to keep your employees safe. These are the internal gears of the machine, and analytics helps spot exactly where they might grind to a halt.
Here's a perfect practical example we've probably all experienced. Ever get a text from your bank about a suspicious charge on your card? That's fraud detection analytics in action. It's a system using patterns and data to spot anything that looks weird and then protecting the system, and you, in pretty much real time. This category also covers really complex processes. For instance, analytics can model the risk of a critical supplier failing somewhere in your supply chain, or the risk of a major project just going completely off the rails. And in this kind of fascinating twist, there's even something called model risk management, which is the risk that the analytical models you're using to measure all these other risks are actually wrong themselves.
Okay, so we've looked at the money and we've looked at the internal processes. Now let's zoom all the way out to the big picture. These are the large-scale risks coming from outside the organization or from its own long-term strategy.
These are the kinds of risks that make headlines. A damaged reputation can absolutely sink a company. Geopolitical events happening in one country can disrupt business all over the globe. And of course, modeling the financial impact of climate and environmental changes is quickly becoming one of the most critical areas of risk analytics today.
To prepare for these giant external shocks, organizations use what are called stress tests. They are the ultimate what-if tool. What if interest rates suddenly triple? What if a major global conflict breaks out? Scenario analysis runs the numbers on these worst-case futures to see if the organization can actually withstand the storm.
So we've mapped this entire world of risk. Now, how do we actually use that map? Let's take a look at the frameworks and the tools that bring all of this information together into a strategy that actually works. It all starts with high-level strategy. An enterprise risk management, or ERM framework, makes sure the company is looking at all its risks together, holistically, instead of in separate little silos. Then, a risk appetite framework formally defines how much risk the company is willing to take to get to its goals. Are they aggressive or are they more conservative? And finally, governance provides the rulebook and the oversight for how this entire system is managed.
And here we can see a key process in action, the risk control self-assessment. It's this proactive cycle where teams first identify their own risks, then they look at the controls they have in place. Next, they evaluate if those controls are actually working, and finally, they develop action plans to close any gaps they find. It's really about empowering everyone to manage their own little part of the risk map.
Now, this slide highlights a really critical distinction. A standard business metric, like sales revenue, is like looking in the rearview mirror. It tells you what's already happened. But a key risk indicator, or a KRI, is like a forward-looking warning light on your dashboard. For example, if 80% of your revenue comes from a single client, that is a huge KRI. It doesn't mean you've lost any money yet, but it's a bright red light warning you about potential danger down the road.
So where do all these warning lights and maps and metrics come together? Well, they live on risk analytics dashboards. This is the command center, the mission control. It's a single visual view that pulls all this complex data together, allowing leaders to see the entire risk landscape at a glance and make really informed decisions.
I love this quote because it just gets to the heart of the matter. Risk analytics isn't about trying to eliminate risk. That's impossible. It's about gaining clarity. It's about understanding what you can influence and what you can't, and then focusing your energy on making the smartest choices you can within those constraints.
And that leaves us with one final thought to chew on. We've built this incredible data-driven map of financial, operational, and strategic dangers. But if we can use analytics to see every single risk we know how to look for, what then is the biggest risk that remains? Maybe it's the one we haven't even thought to map yet.